All right, I'm just going to say it. Some of you shouldn't be jewelry resellers, not because you're incapable, but because it takes a certain kind of mindset, a certain kind of drive, a certain kind of tenacity in order to really make this work. That's what we're going to talk about today, jewelry friends. Hello, my name is Desiree, and you know that I am your jewelry reselling bestie. And because I'm your jewelry reselling bestie, you know that I need to keep it real. I need to be a straight shooter. I may ruffle a little bit of feathers today, but we're going to talk about why some of you should not be jewelry resellers. And it's not because you're not capable, it's not because you're not whatever, but I really believe that reselling jewelry is probably one of the more difficult categories as it relates to reselling just in general, especially on eBay, because not only is that category difficult to learn, it's also very competitive and very saturated. And so it's not easy to just start listing jewelry pieces and watch the money just roll on in. No, it does take a little bit of knowledge, hustle, tenacity, grind, and determination in order to really make this work. And not everybody is cut out for this, and not everybody can sustain the mindset and the output that I believe it really takes to do this at a profitable level. And you know that's what I love to talk about here on this podcast is how we can make money as jewelry resellers. But remember, it does take a certain kind of personality and it does take someone who is willing to do the work. So that's what I'm going to cover in today's podcast episode. But before we get into that, you know, I like to always remind you to make sure you check out our websites, jewelryresellerspodcast.com, because over there you can opt in to our newsletter. And when you do that, you will get access to a document that I created, the 20 best-selling vintage jewelry brands that I think all resellers should know. And then you may want to check out the other website, goodgreatfabulous.com, because I've got some ebooks and e-guides over there. And also I'm selling some jewelry pieces and soon to be some other thrifted or vintage finds. All right, so let's go ahead and get into today's topic because I want to talk about this. I think I may have covered this briefly in another episode, but I didn't really think about this from a whole mindset perspective. And also, really, the commitment that it takes in order to make jewelry reselling work for you because there's a lot of myths and fallacies as it relates to what it takes to be a reseller in general. And a lot of people have this misconception that jewelry is one of the fastest or easiest categories to make money in. Now, I'm not going to lie, you can make a lot of money, and I have made a lot of money selling jewelry. But it's taken me a while to get to this point, and I'm going to tell you that I'm not even, committed at the same level I was when I first started. And of course, I'm obviously not going to be having the same results as I've had in years past. So let's go ahead and start by talking about some of the myths and the things that people think when they think about jewelry reselling or flipping jewelry for a profit. Um, the other thing is I had a direct message this past week. Somebody who said she's ready to quit because she's just so frustrated and she has a lot of jewelry. She doesn't know what to do with it, and she said, I'm just ready to give up because I just don't know what to do. I'm overwhelmed. I've got too much. I don't know enough. And that's a pretty common feeling, especially when you're just getting started. But this is from a woman who has been doing this for several years. So I guess I really want to encourage you, and I really want you to get honest with yourself and really ask yourself, is this something that I want to do? Is this something that I think I could do in a way that could create a sustainable profit and income source for me? Or is this something that I'm more doing just for fun or as a hobby? So we're going to talk about some of those things today. And I hope that by the end of this episode, you get really, really clear about whether or not being a jewelry reseller is going to work for you. So let's start with myth number one. I do have my notes as I typically do, but I think we've all heard this before. People think that selling jewelry is easy money. And you and I both know that that's obviously not not the case. Um, in some, I'm not going to say there's not a chance that that could happen, but for the most part, jewelry is a very slow seller. And so if you're looking to make money quickly, this definitely is not it. As a matter of fact, I probably will say that reselling in general is not it. Now, you can definitely build it up to that level, but when you're first starting out, you're probably not going to see daily sales, or maybe in some cases even weekly sales. So it does take some time, and it does take some investment on your part, like we talk about a lot here on this podcast. And you'll be shocked at how long some pieces sit. I've had pieces sit for years. As a matter of fact, I was just talking about this the other day. I had a trinket box that I finally sold, and it had been listed for a year and a half. So it's definitely not fast money, and it's definitely not easy money. All right. And then you also have to be real and recognize sometimes how much effort goes into making $20. All right. It's not only just listing the stuff, it's finding the stuff and then being knowledgeable about the stuff so you can get the maximum amount of money that you can get for that particular piece. Now, myth number two is it's all about the treasure hunt. It's all about the sourcing. It's all about going to the thrift, going to the estate sales, maybe doing the online auctions, and finding all this wonderful, beautiful jewelry that you can flip for a profit. Well, the truth is, while sourcing is exciting, it's everything else that goes with that that makes you the money. And a lot of people don't take into account the time it takes them to source. Once you get the source, it's the processing of the jewelry pieces. Once you process them, and organizing them, cleaning them, whatever, then it's the listing and the photographing. Then sometimes it's the cleaning. Then it's the packaging. Then it's the shipping, and then you get paid. At least if all goes well. So understand that there is a process to making this money. It's not about just showing up and then, a paycheck shows up for you. It's really about the process and understanding how each part is important and how each part has to be um, understood so you can make the money that you want to make. The other thing too is like, the fun really wears off quickly when you have piles of unlisted inventory. I've talked about that before, where sometimes we get in this hoarding mentality, and sometimes we just get stuck, for whatever reason, a variety of reasons. And that doesn't mean you have to abandon jewelry reselling altogether, but you do need to have maybe some type of a backup plan in place for when you have those moments when you're feeling overwhelmed or when you're feeling a little bit like it's just too much. Now, myth number three is you don't need to know much, just flip it. I don't know where that idea came from, because any jewelry reseller that I know that makes money knows that knowledge and education pretty much is everything, because you have to know exactly what you're looking for when you're sourcing, and then you have to know about how much you can sell it for. Now, you're going to have to learn. This is going to take some time. Watching this podcast will definitely help you do that, but you're going to have to put in a lot of hours. You're going to have to put in a lot of time and a lot of mental energy in order to make this work. All right, because you don't want to overpay for anything, and then you don't want to miss out on something because you don't know. Myth number four is that the jewelry sells itself. In some cases, that's absolutely true, but not the majority. And for a lot of us, we don't know enough to know what those particular pieces are. And even if the jewelry did sell itself, does that necessarily mean we're getting the right price for it? I mean, it's still going to take work, right? You still got to list the thing, still got to, photograph it and all the things that go along with it. So sometimes even the most beautiful pieces will get buried if nobody can find them. If your title structure is wrong, or maybe you don't have the right keywords in your description. Maybe your photos aren't that great. So while some jewelry pieces can sell themselves, that's not the norm. Now, myth number five is if you love jewelry, you'll love reselling it. That's what I thought. I said, oh, I love jewelry. So reselling jewelry has to be right up my alley. Now, over the years, I really have developed a passion for reselling jewelry. That was the whole motivation and inspiration for this podcast. But not everybody is kind of in the same flow like I am, and not everybody loves reselling jewelry because it can be a grind, it can be a drag, and it can be difficult. So, loving jewelry doesn't automatically equate to you loving the business of reselling jewelry. So, make sure you understand that. All right, so those are the myths, like I said, the misconceptions and the fallacies about being a jewelry reseller. But let's get into the truths because I really want this to be an honest, straightforward, you know, uh, informative episode. Because if you are thinking about doing this, and if you are thinking about doing this at the level where it pays you a full time income, these are some things you're going to have to master, and these are some things that you are going to have to be thoroughly aware of so you can make this work. All right, so truth number one about jewelry reselling is it's not passive income. It's not a list it and forget it business. Now, in some cases, you may list something and then you don't have to touch it again until it sells. But that's not always the case. Usually, if something hasn't moved within 90 days to 6 months, maybe even a year, you may have to go back and tweak some things. All right, jewelry takes time, the sourcing, the testing, if you have to test metals, things like that, cleaning in some cases, photographing, listing, shipping, and then dealing with returns or customer questions. All of that takes time. And the thing is you have to constantly feed the beast. You have to constantly be listing. You need to constantly be sourcing. Now, you could streamline these and, with practices that we've talked about here on the podcast, like buying in bulk so you don't have to source every week or every month. But you do need to make sure that your listings are showing up every month, right? Because we got to make sure the algorithm knows that we exist. So understand that it's not passive income. This is a very active, active way of making money. Truth number two is that sourcing can be a gamble, especially when you're buying in bulk. I've talked about this before. You don't always know every single piece that's going to be in a bulk lot. Sometimes you may get a lot of good stuff. Sometimes you may get a lot of duds. That's just the reality of sourcing that way. And if you're sourcing piece by piece, well, that could be a time suck. So you're going to have to manage a balance between the two because that's kind of what I do. You'll have some amazing scores and then you'll have some losses that really kind of slow you down. All right. And again, it's going to take time for you to learn what's valuable and what is junk. And that brings us to truth number three that the learning curve is overwhelming. All right. I mean, I've been doing this for years and I still don't know everything and I still am ignorant in a lot of things as it relates to jewelry. I don't know every brand. I don't know every design. I don't know the eras backwards and forwards. I don't know that. But, um, I continue to learn every day. At least I try my best, but understand that the learning never stops. And jewelry is its own culture, its own world, it's its own ecosystem, so to speak. Because there's so many facets of jewelry. There's so many different directions and components as it relates to jewelry. And you're always going to be learning. And sometimes you feel like you need to be a mini gemologist in order to do this. You don't, but the more you learn, the better your results will be. And so you may want to invest in that. And not everybody wants to continue learning. Oh, the other thing I have in my notes too is I wrote this down. It's easy to freeze up because you feel like you're going to make a mistake. I've seen this so many times where so many jewelry resellers or aspiring jewelry resellers will say, well, I don't want to, you know, overprice it or underprice it. I don't want to lose any money. What if somebody doesn't like it? All these things. And so it puts you into, what is it called? Analysis paralysis, and you don't do anything. And then you've got all this jewelry and you just don't do anything with it. That's a real fear and that's a real issue that a lot of jewelry resellers deal with. At some point, I know I have. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Truth number four, scams and ripoffs are very common for beginners. As a matter of fact, somebody left a comment on one of my videos saying that she got scammed. And I've told you guys, I've been scammed more than once because I didn't know any better. So that is a real risk that you are going to take getting started. Now, I try to do my best to make sure that I give you knowledge and tools so that doesn't happen. But of course, it'll happen even with the best of intentions. So if you're new, you can be a target for scams and fakes and all of that. And sometimes sellers will take advantage of you being new too. So understand that's one of the truths of doing this, which is why I say it's not necessarily easy, especially when we're talking about fake stuff in the higher end jewelry. Um, and it makes you nervous too. It makes you scared. So that's one of the things we have to deal with as jewelry resellers, and not everybody is ready to deal with that. Truth number five is that you can easily become a jewelry hoarder. Now, I have done an entire episode on this. You tell yourself you're sourcing, but you're really stockpiling. Your inventory grows faster than you can list it. And you're always just one estate sale, one antique mall away from needing a storage unit for all of your lovely jewelry pieces. So understand you have to be careful with this. You really do, because the jewelry piles up really fast. And like I said, when I see piles of jewelry, in my mind, I'm looking at piles of money. All right, truth number six is that it is really hard to stand out as a jewelry reseller. Now, this is becoming a little bit more challenging because I've had people ask me, well, how do I grow a following? How do I develop my brand as a jewelry reseller? Um, and it's not easy, but the thing is like, it's one of those things that it takes time to build. I don't have the hugest following on all the platforms, but I cultivate my brand and I try and nurture and provide value to my followers and to my audience in the best ways that I can. And that takes time and effort. And a lot of people don't want to do that. That's why a lot of people, I think, choose eBay because they say, oh, well, eBay gets all the traffic and I can just throw my listings up and depend on eBay if I want to pay for promotions or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, you totally can do that. But you know how many other jewelry resellers are doing that too? And do you know how many other resellers are also paying for promoted listings? So that strategy is quickly becoming outdated. And a lot of potential jewelry resellers don't want to face the reality that you're going to have to do more than just rely on eBay or whatever platform in order to make sales, right? So if you plan to do this, like I said, as a full time gig, you will have to establish and build a brand. You will have to uh, cultivate an audience to some degree because you can't totally rely on promoted listings or whatever, right? You want people to really trust you and know you, and you want to build that long term relationship. All right, now the last truth that I really want to get into, and this is kind of how I started today's podcast episode, was the mindset. Being a jewelry reseller can totally mess up your mind, your um, your perspective as it relates to being a reseller because you're responsible for every aspect of this. There's highs and lows when you do this. Sometimes there's a lot of inconsistency when you do this because we're not sourcing the same exact jewelry every week or however often. And so you may have a week where, oh my gosh, sales are just, flying in. And then the next week, it's like you don't exist. And this really can mess you up mentally, emotionally, and in some cases physically too, because you start to feel like, I need to do more. So you physically burn yourself out, or you get depressed and you don't want to do anything, and you lay in bed because you just feel so demotivated. So I'm just going to say it. This is a hard this is a hard business. But it's also a very rewarding and a very fulfilling business, but it will take time for you to master it and for you to develop and create the business that you specifically want because not just in the jewelry reselling category. I've seen this with clothing sellers, I've seen this with toy sellers, handbag sellers. There's no guarantees for any of us in any category as we do this. Yeah, there's a lot of money to be made, but you have to be really, really, like I said, committed to the decision of making this work. And the other thing too, because I know I have questioned myself about this, where I see, maybe I haven't had a sale for a week. Maybe I've done a live show and nobody has bought anything. I've had that happen more than once. And you start to question yourself. You start to doubt, like, you know, am I just not meant to do this? Does my jewelry suck? Is my pricing wrong? Like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my jewelry? What's wrong with my business? And you really start to internalize a lot of this stuff. And so you have to have a mental strength so you don't get caught up in that. And I see a lot of jewelry resellers doing this. And I mean, I'm not saying you have to be in the perfect, you know, mental headspace, but you do have to understand that there is an ebb and a flow to this business. And you have to understand that sometimes you're not doing anything wrong, right? Sometimes you're not doing anything wrong. It's just that day. And so you have to learn to look at your reselling business as a whole. And then you have to learn how to look at your reselling business not by what's happening on the individual day, but maybe what happens, from the perspective of 30 days or a quarter or a year. One bad day does not mean you have a bad business. One bad week does not mean you have a bad business. All right. So we have to kind of be real with ourselves and understand that that's kind of how it is. All right. Even my jewelry reseller friends who make way more than I do, they have bad days too. And they have spectacular days. All right. So don't, like I said, internalize that you're doing something wrong because you're probably not. And if you are, you'll fix it or you'll change it. Okay. So I hope that, motivates you and encourages you and inspires you to keep going. Because maybe you started this podcast episode thinking, yeah, I'm one of the ones that shouldn't do this. But I'm hoping by the end of this podcast episode, you feel totally equipped and ready to do this. So now I want to talk about, why do I still do this? I mean, if this is not for everybody, and if this is not easy, and if this is not something that I believe everybody is cut out for, then you're probably saying, well, Desiree, why do you do it? Right? That's a legitimate question. So let's talk about that. I mean, it's not only about why I do it, but why so many of us choose to do it, intentionally choose to do it. Now, I love jewelry. I really do. And here's the thing, I like reselling. I don't I don't subscribe to saying, oh, I love reselling. It's the best business ever. But I do like reselling. But my passion for jewelry is much higher and much stronger than my like for reselling. However, reselling gives me a vehicle to kind of fuel my love and passion for jewelry. It also is the inspiration for this podcast, like a lot of you know. And I've made a lot of friends in the reselling community. So it gives me things that I didn't really expect and that I didn't really plan. And so that part I really like. But if there were other ways for me to make money with my jewelry, I would definitely be doing them. And who knows, maybe I might have some things planned on the horizon. But that's why I keep showing up, and that's why I stay committed, to the best of my ability. So, how can you shift into that mindset of, yes, I do believe jewelry reselling is for me? It doesn't mean you have to love every aspect of it. It doesn't mean you have to love eBay, or you have to love reselling, or you have to love shipping or photographing. No, it doesn't mean any of that. But you love it enough, or you like it enough, in order to stay committed and follow through. All right. And you're going to do that. How? Number one, you're going to treat it like a business, because it really is a business. You're going to schedule your work time. You're going to track your profits. You're going to track your inventory. And you're not going to wing anything. You're not just going to fly by the seat of your pants. You're not just going to show up and hope for the best. All right. This is very strategic if you're going to make this work. Doesn't mean you have to love it, but it does mean that you are committed to the structure of this particular business. Number two, you're going to source smarter, and you may want to source either smaller or less frequently. If you're the kind of person that loves to buy bulk lots, but you get really overwhelmed really quickly, you're going to have to exercise some discipline and not be drawn into the constant, oh, I need to buy. All right. This is where we have to really be honest with ourselves, and we have to really, you know, like I said, be disciplined. I know it's not easy and it's not fun. I know it's not, but that's the reality of what's going to be required in order to make this work. And so we stay in the right mindset. Number three, you're going to have to focus on one thing at a time. Now, I am really challenged with this. I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm guessing maybe that's what I got, because I can really get scattered very quickly. I tend to get easily distracted. I have this going on, I have that going on. Oh, and then something else going on. So this is really a challenge for me, and this is where a lot of my struggles come in, because I try to do so many things because I think I can. So, you know, figure out a plan. Like, what are you going to do first? Are you going to master your photos? Are you going to learn jewelry eras? Do you want to get really good at just sourcing? Like, what is the most important thing for you to make this business work? And focus on really getting dialed in on that. Focus on really getting good, really getting strong in that one particular area. All right. And the other thing is, once you get really good at one part of your business, other parts of your business will start to flow better as well. All right. You also want to get educated before you buy. I think I've talked about this quite a bit. This is nothing new. This is not anything, that you guys don't already know. Of course, the more you know, the easier this job will be for you, because a lot of it is not going to be guessing, or hoping that you've got something good. You're going to operate from a place of knowing, and that's an entirely different energy. Number five, you want to build some routines into your business. All right. Now, this I think is can totally be a game changer. When I made the routine or the decision to list 25 jewelry pieces a day, totally transformed my business, because I knew that I had 25 listings that I had to publish each and every day, which meant I had to have a certain amount of jewelry pieces every week, which meant I had to do sourcing however often it was at the time. I think I was sourcing online and in person at least 3 to 4 days a week, in order to maintain that 25 jewelry pieces a day listing routine or listing goal. All right. So you see that once you kind of get committed to a routine, then you start to fill in all the things you need to do in order to stick to that routine. I'm telling you, this was a game changer for me. And if I ever decide to go back to to doing jewelry reselling at that particular level, I know exactly what to do to unlock that, because it really is about getting the routine in place of how many listings I need to do per day, because now I'm not guessing when I'm outsourcing how many pieces do I need. Now, I always try to get more pieces than I actually need, so I give myself a little bit of a buffer. And so you may want to do something like that too, but you may not need to do 25 pieces a day. Maybe you're committed to doing 5 pieces every single day, no matter what. So when you do the math on that, you know exactly how many pieces you need each week, and you know exactly how many pieces you need to source. All right. And so there's no guessing because you have all of that figured out. All right. The next thing I want to tell you about, which I also mentioned earlier, is to build your brand, not just the listings. A lot of resellers are afraid of this. Like they think, all I got to do is list on eBay. That's all I got to do. And I don't know why so many people shy away from this. I don't know if it's because they don't want to be seen in social media. Like a lot of people don't want to put their face on camera, or they don't want to post on socials. Maybe some people are overwhelmed or intimidated by the whole brand building thing. I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be very complicated. It could be something as simple as just posting once a day on Instagram, sharing a jewelry piece that you listed, or um, maybe doing a video on YouTube. Like it can be very, very simple. It doesn't have to be something, over the top complicated. And you don't even have to show your face in order to do that. But you need to get comfortable marketing yourself and putting yourself out there so you can connect with buyers. And so you can, really leverage your online presence as a way to tap into customers directly. And it's not that scary. As a matter of fact, it's kind of fun, at least for me, but I know not everybody, feels that way. But the other thing too is when you build a brand, people really start to feel a connection with you because they know you, they know where to find you, they know what you're about, and you can even show parts of your personal life if you're comfortable. You don't have to show everything, but whatever you feel comfortable with, so people can relate to you and people want to be connected to you. Now, this also creates repeat buyers, right? I know it has for me. As a matter of fact, I've told you guys this at least a few times here in past episodes, that I have buyers who buy from me privately, and I don't have to do anything. I mean, other than, if I have something new they might be interested in, I just send them a message and I say, hey, are you interested? Would you like this? Blah, blah, blah. And these are ladies who have been buying from me for years. And that doesn't really take anything, but they found me on social media, right? So you can create these types of connections as well. Okay. So, the last thing that I want to talk about with you is your mindset. I feel like that's kind of a running theme through this episode, because I feel like this is where a lot of people kind of get tripped up. It's the comparing yourself to other people. It's worrying about what you don't know, feeling like an imposter, like, well, I'm not a jewelry expert, so I don't know if I'm ready to do this. I'm telling you, all of us, well, I shouldn't say all of us, because some of us do have a lot more jewelry knowledge than others. But just having jewelry knowledge is not enough to run a successful jewelry reselling business, right? We all know that there's also the business mindset in addition to the jewelry mindset. Okay. And so we have to, do well in both of those. Now, we don't have to be the best of the best, but we do have to be pretty strong in our business mindset. So that way, the jewelry, the jewelry expert can shine, right? And the jewelry expert can make the money. And I say expert loosely because by no means am I a jewelry expert, but you know what I mean. I consider myself a jewelry expert in the sense that I can bring jewelry pieces to the marketplace and create an opportunity for people to buy those jewelry pieces. And they may not have access to them otherwise. So think about the value that you're offering, because that will give you a lot of confidence too in what you do. Yes, you may not know the difference between real gold and gold plated, but jewelry, right? Maybe even if it's just a little bit, and you know that you're finding beautiful pieces and that somebody is probably going to want them. You need to make sure that you are confident in your abilities as it relates to sourcing, showcasing, and selling. And that takes time to learn. And you probably will be learning that for years because I know I am. So, yeah, maybe you shouldn't be a reseller. Maybe you shouldn't be a jewelry reseller. Maybe you shouldn't do this. But if you're willing to face some of the not so glamorous parts of the business that I talked about today, then you can overcome this. You can make this work. You can make the money. And remember, you're in the process of building something amazing. Because even if you do this just as a hobby, it's really one of the more fun and glorious hobbies to do, because it's just being surrounded by pretty beautiful things and appreciating, what comes along with that, because I know probably to my very last day. I will always be passionate about jewelry. I will always want to see jewelry and look at it and wear it and all the things. So, but that doesn't mean I'm always going to want to be a jewelry reseller. I will be upfront about that. I don't know if I want to be a jewelry reseller for the rest of my life. Now, it's working for me right now in this particular season or phase of my life, but I know that this is probably not something I'm going to do forever. My love for jewelry is something that is forever, but being a jewelry reseller is probably not something I'm going to do forever. So I really want to maximize my time in this season of my life, and I want to share as much as I can for other jewelry resellers who may want to do this or who are thinking about doing this. So I hope that this episode really inspired you, and maybe for some of you it was a wake-up call about what it really takes to make this work, because I mean, it really is not easy, but it really is simple. It's simple as it relates to what we do, but it's not always easy, and sometimes this isn't something where you can just show up, get the job done, and go home. Like if you were doing, like if you had a regular job, like a 9 to 5 kind of thing, where you just show up, do your thing, and then go home. This really isn't like that at all. And sometimes uh, aspects of being a jewelry reseller will infiltrate other parts of your life. Um, and it may not necessarily be in a good way, or it may not be in a way that you can entirely control. All right, so think about some of these things. Let me know if there's anything I missed, or if there is something where you feel like, yeah, this isn't for me and this is why. Or I've had some of these challenges and here's how I overcame them. Because I think it would really be helpful to not only those of us who've been doing this for a while, but people who are thinking about doing this. And I see a lot of people rush into jewelry reselling because when they're resellers and they sell in other categories and they happen to come across some jewelry, and then they happen to think, oh yeah, I can just list all of this stuff and it's going to make me a ton of money. It might, but it might not. All right, so that is what I got for you today in this episode, jewelry friends. Like I said, let me know your thoughts. I would love to read your comments and see your feedback and keep this discussion going. Are you ready for this? Do you really think that you should be a jewelry reseller? Have you been questioning whether or not you want to continue to do this, whether or not you want to start doing this? I want to hear it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. And I'll check in with you again really soon.